On this Monday night, Ukraine refuses to surrender Mariupol to Russia. Moscow's ultimatum rejected while people run out of places to hide.
There is no Mariupol anymore. They bombed everything.
The accusations of genocide as roadsides become cemeteries. Russian missiles obliterate a Kyiv mall. And in Kherson, protesters targeted with grenades and guns. Aviation disaster. The airliner carrying 132 people that plunged from the sky. And a gold mine in the garbage. The Canadian technology turning discarded things into brand new bling.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Jackson Prosco.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Ukraine is rejecting Russia's demands that it surrender the besieged port city of Mariupol, where an estimated 300,000 people are trapped as civilians face the brunt of Russian advances. Conditions in that city are deteriorating by the hour as Russian forces inflict more horrors. In the capital, Kyiv, a shopping mall was hit by airstrikes, killing several people. Tonight, the U.S. says there's clear evidence Russia is committing war crimes. And NATO believes the nearly month-long war is approaching a stalemate, one where neither side can win. Mike Armstrong begins our coverage tonight.
It is a horror that should be unimaginable. Instead, it's easy to find on social media. These are videos shared to the platform Telegram on a channel called Mariupol Now. This one shows fire and devastation in almost every direction. Ukraine's defense minister is in London and not holding back.
Russia is now committing a real act of genocide against the Ukrainian city of Mariupol.
The situation on the ground is so desperate, they're burying bodies anywhere they can, as fast as they can. I hope there'll be some sort of reburial, this man says, that this is just temporary. In normal times, Mariupol would have a population of 400,000, about the size of London, Ontario. Some have escaped, but about 3/4 are still trapped, with fewer and fewer places to seek shelter. Everything is destroyed. You can see it for yourself, this woman says. Everything is broken. Russian troops have at times let buses of civilians leave, but they're not letting aid and supplies in. A convoy has been sent, according to the Red Cross. It just hasn't been allowed through.
It's stuck, no access. So they can go.
The Ukrainian MP says Russia is trying to starve the city into submission. Calls it mass murder.
It's reality. There is no Mariupol anymore. They bombed everything.
Now, Mariupol's location makes it a key strategic target for Russia. It sits between two areas already controlled by Russian forces and would create a land corridor between them. Even back in 2014, Russia-backed rebels tried to take Mariupol. They held it briefly, but were forced out.
Putin really wants to show that he can take back what he believes belongs to him.
Ukrainian soldiers were offered safe passage out of Mariupol if they laid down their weapons and raised white flags. Russian forces gave them a deadline of 4 a.m. local time. That offer was rejected immediately. Now, getting information out of Mariupol is getting tougher. A team from the Associated Press that left recently is believed to have been the last journalists out. These are images taken by that team. They say they were targeted by Russian soldiers, literally hunted, and had no choice but to leave. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Rzeszów, Poland.
Russia's advances on the capital of Kyiv took a grim turn as a missile strike rocked the heart of that city. It hit a shopping mall. The blast sparked a huge fire and sent debris flying through the area. Rescuers worked frantically to pull survivors from the rubble. At least 8 people were killed. And in the few places Russia has successfully occupied, Ukrainians are now being subjected to new horrors. In the southern city of Kherson, the first major urban center to fall, Russian troops today opened fire on residents there who were protesting the invasion. We need to warn you, some of these images are disturbing. Redmond Shannon has our report.
It's another day of devastation in Kyiv. Overnight shelling targeting this large shopping centre. It's hard for me to speak, says this woman. My daughter was working here yesterday just before it happened. Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko is advising people to wear respirator masks, and he has ordered another curfew until Wednesday morning.
Kiev, as of today, is not in full encirclement. There is a route remaining southeast of Kyiv that Russians cannot control. And actually, according to Ukrainian information, Russians were even pushed back.
These babies requiring hospital care, first rushed from eastern Ukraine, are now in a cardiac unit 10 kilometres from Kyiv's front line.
In 2 months, he will need open heart surgery.
Any further Russian advance could threaten critical procedures and lives. On Monday, Russia claimed to have killed 80 Ukrainian and foreign soldiers at a military training centre west of Kyiv. In the southern occupied city of Kherson, protests against Russian forces are met with resistance. Ukraine's armed forces says one person was hurt when civilians were targeted with gunfire and stun grenades. At the Polish border, 15-year-old Bohdan is one of almost 3.5 million refugees to leave so far.
I think that in Polsce I feel better because I don't worry about me. But something I worry about my family, about my mom and dad.
His mother remains in Kyiv caring for his disabled father. An aid group helped the boy safely reach Poland. The European Union is again warning the world about the threats faced by so many other children. It says there is a huge risk of child trafficking on top of the chaos of war. Meanwhile, Germany's foreign minister says the total number of refugees could reach 10 million in the coming weeks. Jackson?
Redmond Shannon in London. Thanks, Redmond. We're learning more about the victims of the Russian attacks on the city of Kharkiv, including a 96-year-old Holocaust survivor. Relatives say Boris Romanchenko died Friday when a rocket hit his apartment building. He was deported from Ukraine to Germany in 1942 and survived 4 Nazi concentration camps. Romanchenko went on to take an active role in Holocaust commemorations and explained he was due to be killed just before he was liberated from the Bergen-Belsen camp by Allied forces in April of 1945. Officials in Kharkiv say Russian assaults on the city have killed at least 500 residents and more than 600 buildings have been destroyed. In northeastern Ukraine, Russian troops shelled a chemical plant in Sumy, causing toxic ammonia to leak from a 50-ton tank. President Zelensky says one person was injured. Residents had been told to take shelter to avoid exposure. Ammonia can be deadly if ingested, inhaled, or absorbed through the skin. The leak has now been contained. NATO believes the war in Ukraine may soon be unwinnable by either side. A stalemate would be long and bloody, and that's adding to the pressure on Western leaders to do something to shift the balance of power in Ukraine's favor. NATO leaders, including Prime Minister Trudeau, will meet in person later this week. And as Heather Yourex-West reports, they're facing calls to take a more direct role in the conflict.
It is the sound the people of Ukraine have been living under for nearly a month. Air raid sirens that Ukraine's president is imploring Western leaders help put to an end. No euros for the occupiers, Volodymyr Zelensky said. Close all your ports to them. Don't supply them with goods. Refuse Russian energy resources. Push Russia to leave Ukraine.
The most effective role we can continue to play is by providing that extensive military assistance that we have been providing, economic and humanitarian assistance.
NATO leaders will meet in Brussels for a major summit Thursday. A meeting of the European Council is planned as well. From there, the U.S. president will travel to Poland. The Polish president keen on NATO allies taking a more direct role in the conflict, pressing the U.S. to facilitate the transfer of Polish MiG fighter jets while proposing a peacekeeping mission of armed NATO soldiers into Ukraine.
I think the Polish proposal is a good one. I suspect, however, that most Western countries don't have the political backbone and, I suppose, the popular support to put troops in harm's way.
But short of a physical intervention, there is still more that NATO and its allies can do, including ramping up sanctions to the point where Russia's economy is completely cut off.
Sometimes you have to show courage. Sometimes you have to stand up for certain principles and take some risks.
U.S. officials have also issued new warnings that Russia may be planning cyber attacks against critical infrastructure within the United States as Russia looks for new avenues to limit the West's ability to assist Ukraine. Jackson?
Heather in Washington, thank you. A Boeing jet plunges to the ground in China. Coming up, the country's worst plane crash in more than 11 years. Plus, free in the sea, a new home for a bale of baby sea turtles.
We're just here to hold our dictator accountable.
A group of anti-mask mandate protesters targeted the home of Nova Scotia's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Robert Strang, last night. The harassment began just hours before the province officially ended its 2-year-long COVID-19 state of emergency and lifted most public health measures.
You know, it's concerning. I was up till well after 2 o'clock with prank phone calls and things like that. So very juvenile and kind of unwelcome behavior that I know the vast majority of Nova Scotians do not support that at all.
Strang thanked the RCMP for assistance in dealing with the situation. During a Facebook live stream of the protest, one demonstrator could be heard telling an officer they wanted to speak to Strang about last week's decision to extend masking in public schools. And as of today in Nova Scotia, there are no province-wide restrictions on gatherings and no social distancing or mask mandates, other than in high-risk settings like hospitals and long-term care homes. The mask mandate for schools will remain in place until at least mid-April. That decision follows advice from a group of pediatric doctors who warned that while case counts and hospitalizations are declining, they still remain high. As COVID-19 restrictions ease right across Canada, Ontario is the latest province to remove mask mandates, scrapping them in most public spaces. As Abigail Beeman reports, not everyone is ready to take that step.
Walking out, masks on, these students protest the end of a mask mandate in Ontario schools.
Our group has pushed for access for N95 masks for students. That's not happening. It's an equity issue. So as others' masks come off, I feel the need to upgrade.
COVID might spread again, and we don't want to see the numbers rising.
Once scientists approve of this decision, I will be safe.
In children who are average risk, we really don't have the data to tell us that this is an important measure.
This family doctor and former child and family therapist says there isn't enough science, neither on how well masks actually work to stop the spread in the classroom, nor on long-term development and social impacts.
Kids need to watch sound and vowel pronunciation coming from their teachers' mouths. And when they can't see that, it affects their ability to learn how to read, right? And these are skills that are meant to happen at certain developmental stages.
Ontario is the 6th province to drop school mask mandates this month. BC will follow after spring break. PEI and the Yukon still require masks in school. So do Nova Scotia, Nunavut, the Northwest Territories, and Newfoundland and Labrador, but that may change in the next few weeks. Meanwhile, in the U.S., Hawaii remains the only state with a classroom mask mandate. The risk of severe illness for children with COVID remains very low.
Hospitalizations do remain a fairly rare outcome and probably on par to what we might see during a bad influenza season. And yet we don't mandate mask wearing for influenza.
But after wearing a mask in the classroom for so long, opinions are mixed about taking them off, and not everyone will.
I'm so happy because myself, I didn't like wearing masks.
You feel comfortable, I'd like you to still stay in your mask, and they were quite happy about it.
I think the masks are actually developmentally not great, so I think it's time.
Change can be tough for kids, and experts say for some, this was bound to be a difficult day, no matter the decision. Abigail Beeman, Global News, Ottawa.
In Hong Kong, some of the world's toughest pandemic measures are set to ease next month. Hong Kong's chief executive, Carrie Lam, says her government will lift a ban on flights from 9 countries, including Canada, as of April 1st. Schools and businesses will begin reopening later in the month, but no timetable was given for resumption of travel between Hong Kong and mainland China, where cases have surged to their highest numbers of the pandemic. China is in mourning over its worst air disaster in over a decade. A Boeing 737 jet operated by China Eastern Airlines was carrying 132 people when it went down in a remote mountainous area in southern China. There are reports the aircraft suddenly entered a steep dive and crashed about 90 seconds later. Nearby villagers were first to discover the extensive trail of debris. No survivors have been found. Family members have now gathered at the airport in Guangzhou, where the plane was headed, and arrangements are being made for travel to the crash site. Chinese state media says the airline's entire fleet of 737-800s has been grounded. Ground to a halt. Will a CP rail work stoppage derail the supply chain? A CP rail work stoppage is into its second day with conductors, engineers, and train and yard workers off the job. The federal government is facing pressure to end the stoppage. Labour Minister Seamus O'Regan is in Calgary, where negotiations are underway. O'Regan says talks have been productive, but there's no timeline for when 3,000 workers will be back at work. David Aiken has the details.
Back in the House of Commons after a 2-week recess, the opposition demanded the government do something to end the CP rail work stoppage.
So what is the government's plan to immediately resolve this dispute?
Several industry groups representing CP Rail's biggest customers, well, they had the answer.
This is very time sensitive. Hours matter, and we are urging MPs and senators to address this through back-to-work legislation.
But the Trudeau government, for now, is trusting both sides to reach a deal.
They are working hard. No one has left the table. Our party believes that the best deals are reached at the table.
In any event, back-to-work legislation could run into an NDP hurdle in the House of Commons. In 2011, the NDP, led by Jack Layton, led a 3-day-long filibuster against back-to-work legislation during a Canada Post strike.
You can count on us to oppose back-to-work legislation again.
Meanwhile, experts warn a lengthy rail service disruption would almost certainly cause food prices to spike and might even cause food shortages later in the year. That's because those idled rail cars are normally carrying fertilizer for crops which will soon be planted.
All eyes are on North America to deliver, to help out from a global food security perspective. And you have to think about fertilizers, agricultural output later this year. So there's lots going on here.
Other rail cars would be filled with feed for hungry Western Canada cattle.
This could be the most devastating thing that we've seen, and it's human caused. And from our point of view, it's very easy for humans to fix this problem. And we, as everybody here said, we don't have a lot of time.
And even if this CP work stoppage ended after 4 or 5 days, consider this. In 2018, CN Rail had a work stoppage. It lasted 8 days, but it took 6 weeks to get supply chains back to normal. Jackson.
David Aiken in Ottawa, thanks. Prince William and Kate are on a tour of Central America and the Caribbean to strengthen Britain's ties with Commonwealth countries. The week-long visit will take the royal couple to Belize, Jamaica, and the Bahamas, and comes just months after Barbados cut ties with the Queen. It was organized at the Queen's request as she marks 70 years on the throne. But local opposition forced Prince William and Kate to scrap a planned visit to a cacao farm in Belize on Saturday. And their upcoming trip to Jamaica has angered a group of people calling for slavery reparations and an apology for colonialism. Well, from bits to bucks, next, mining the fortune inside your old electronics. Well, there are big things ahead for these little fellas. Conservation officials in India released 150 baby sea turtles into the Indian Ocean. The species, which is believed to have been around for more than 100 million years, is under threat due to human activities, including poaching, habitat destruction, and the effects of climate change. And our impact on the planet isn't limited to animals. As we keep ditching our old gadgets for new ones, toxic electronic waste is becoming a major problem. And that has prompted the UK's Royal Mint to quite literally turn trash into cash. And they're doing it with a technique developed right here in Canada. Ross Lord reports.
In a consumer society that's increasingly hooked on electronics, an old adage has new meaning. One person's trash is another's treasure.
Inside those printed circuit boards and on those printed circuit boards are precious metals, and they're laden with precious metals. Unfortunately, 7% of the gold in the world is in these electronics, this discarded electronics.
Right now, only 18% of the planet's e-waste is recycled. The rest, 54 million tons per year, is essentially burned, releasing toxic byproducts. But the Royal Mint in the UK says it's opening a new plant to extract gold and other precious metals to use in its coins. The Mint's partner is a Canadian startup, Exseer of Calgary. Exseer is not speaking to media, but the Mint is singing its praises for a patented chemical process.
This chemistry is able to remove 99% of the gold that's sitting on these circuit boards to a 99.99% purity.
Of course, all that glitters is not new. Canadian recyclers say they've been doing similar work since 2007.
They use metal from our electronics to make the metals for the 2010 Olympics. So, yes, we've been doing it for a long time.
Vancouver Olympic medals included small bits of recycled electronics. While the Royal Canadian Mint recycles by keeping coins in circulation, the UK Royal Mint says its plant will clean out up to 90 tons of UK circuit boards per week, extracting hundreds of kilograms almost immediately, including gold, silver, and copper. They'll be melted down into new coins. Welcome renewal from a venerable institution. Ross Lord, Global News.
And that's Global National for this Monday night. I'm Jackson Prosco. A number of Canadians are likely thinking about their own ties to Ukraine these days, and we'll leave you with a big one. This is the world's largest pisanka, located in Vegreville, Alberta. Pisankas are a Ukrainian tradition. They're hand-decorated Easter eggs given as a charm to bring good fortune and fend off evil spirits. Thanks for watching, and I hope you'll join us again tomorrow. Have a great night.